we're going to go through just a couple of areas of the Unified Compliance Framework and what we deliver and how we deliver it. This is going to focus specifically on the spreadsheets, which means we're going to be focusing on the areas around authority documents, citations, and controls. So really just these three areas from the structure of governance compliance. So when we deliver the UCF, we do quarterly deliveries. We deliver the UCF in a zip file that has these folders in it. When you unzip the zip file, these folders will come out, and you can, of course, go through. And the idea is to go through it in order, which is left to right through the structure, so that you can just determine what you legally need to do and how you need to accomplish your internal governance requirements. So I'm going to leave research sites alone. It's essentially under what authorities are you. And I want to just take a quick look at authority documents. And in here, there's an authority document spreadsheet. And this will have the current release list of authority documents, list of active authority documents. So this quarter, Q3 of 2013, there were 720 authority documents live in the UCF. There are a bunch of others that have been mapped but are no longer live because they've been deprecated. Something like PCI 1.0 would be deprecated. What's important here is to understand that there's a hierarchy throughout the UCF. So it's a legal hierarchy for technical controls. And so the hierarchy for authority documents, there are two different areas. One is the AD type. So the type of authority document matters from a hierarchical perspective because something that can get you put in jail is higher up on the hierarchy than vendor documentation, okay? So you can look through here and see which areas you'd like to participate in or what you'd like to select. But the other area that I want to highlight is the parent category, because that's what we're going to use when we look at the control spreadsheet. So every authority document is essentially put in a bucket. And again, it's a legal hierarchy, and so it's a legal area. And these are different horizontals and verticals. So verticals would be things like banking and finance or energy, and horizontals would be geographic areas like UK and Canada, European, US, or it could even be something like SOX, right, which covers a lot of different verticals. So these categories will become the column groupings for the control spreadsheet. And the documents that are in these rows will each have its own separate column in the control spreadsheet. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. We're going to bounce over to the controls. And one thing I did want to mention is if you go to our website, you can always, first of all, if you sign in, you'll be able to get through all the stuff that I'm going to show you, and it's a free login. So you can share control IDs, whatever, and links to get to the pages below that I'm going to be showing. But one of the things is there's a current list of all the authority documents where it says hundreds of complex regulations. If I click on that, you'll see the current list of authority documents in the UCF online. So this is another link you can easily share, so you don't have to send it on the spreadsheet or whatever if you don't want to. Okay, so now we're over to the controls, and folder number 4 is the controls folder. And in here, you'll notice there are 16 items, and 15 of them are spreadsheets, and there's one called Using the UCF Spreadsheets. I'm actually going to demonstrate what is in this file. So there's not much different what I'm going to do. I mean, there are a few different things, really just how to use Excel more than anything. But so if you want to check it out again, it's worth reading this Using the UCF Spreadsheets file. So these first 14 impact zones, or top levels of the UCF hierarchy, are broken out into separate spreadsheets. And we did this because people asked us, hey, we want to just send around HR or records management controls. We don't want to give everybody every control in the overall spreadsheet. So we broke them down into the top level hierarchies. For Q4 of 2013, we'll introduce another top level domain, and it's going to be called third party and supply chain management, because there are a bunch of new controls coming out there, and we're pulling the controls from all these other areas that rely specifically on third party and supply chain management. So you'll see 15 top level hierarchies. And you'll notice that we cover IT, physical security, records management, and privacy are the main areas we cover. So whenever we map an authority document, we only pull out those controls which pertain to those areas or those mandates. So let's take a look at the UCF control spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet, as I mentioned before, will have column groupings that are these parent categories. So here's banking and finance, energy, FINRA, etc. And you'll notice that they're groups. Now, we didn't design Excel, so you can't blame all this on us. But when you look at, if you want to look at banking and finance, for example, this column, if you want to expand it, you have to go over, above, and to the right and click on that plus. And now you can see all the documents contained in that group. And from a spreadsheet perspective, the number that we put in here is the number of references that this particular area has from all the documents contained therein. So for a given row. So if we look at establish and maintain information classification scheme, control ID 00601, for banking and finance, there are 2 references, and it's in FFIC information security on page 12 and on page 22 of FIC operations. So we recommend that you take that first spreadsheet that I showed you, the authority document spreadsheet, and pass that to the lawyers, so the people who are determining what you need to actually comply with. And then they'll select the sub-documents that you need to deal with. Now, often you'll need to deal with the whole group, and that's part of why we set up the hierarchy the way we did. Chances are, if you're in banking and finance, you're going to need to deal with most or all of these documents in here. Okay, so I'm going to just collapse this for the sake of the demo so I don't have to keep scrolling around. But you can always open it up, and you can always treat any specific document the way I'm going to treat the entire group. So let's collapse it down and scroll back over. Okay, so you'll notice that the spreadsheet is organized and into these different column groupings. And you can see the groupings goes from C to AB to AF, etc. And that in the right-hand column, we put something called internal guidance. And this is where we want you to put a mark with an X in this column if you care about something specifically, right? And you may care about it because it's part of internal controls, or you may care about it in this case. The reason why we're actually focused on this is because you're mandated to do something, all right? There's some kind of regulation that says, hey, you need to do it. Well, how do you figure out what that is with all the overlapping controls and everything? Well, that's where some of these other cool spreadsheet features come into play, particularly sorting. Filtering. So if I want to just pick only areas where there's actually controls for a given group, I can click on the filter here and uncheck blanks. So this is going to show me every row where there's not a blank. And so for this, I picked payment card because a lot of people have to deal with PCI, because a lot of people get audited on PCI. So when I selected only payment card filters, you'll notice that there's 427 direct controls of the 6,477 controls. Okay, and we can scroll down and look at them and go through them one at a time, or we can do what we're talking about before, and that is let's build our set of controls that we need to deal with. So I'm going to go over to internal guidance here, and I'm going to put an X. And I'm going to copy and paste that X all the way down. And for copying, you just do Control-C, and for pasting, you can do Shift-Control-Down arrow. It'll take you to the bottom of the group, and then paste the X. And now when I release this and show the blanks again, you'll see that there's X's and spaces, right? And the X's correspond to wherever there were numbers here. Okay, so that's the first group I've done is payment card. Well, let's look at Sarbanes-Oxley, because that's also something that's common for folks to deal with. And now let's go ahead and come in here and uncheck the blanks. And I can scroll up a little bit, and you'll notice there's 174 direct controls for this group of documents, right? And again, the group of documents, you go up and to the right. I can just see what it is. It's Sarbanes-Oxley itself, but it's also A123 implementation guide, PCOB, etc. Okay, so if I close this group down, you'll notice I already have some X's here. So there are overlapping controls. And I can see how many overlapping controls there are if I put another filter. So I'm going to add a second filter and say, just show me what the X's are, just so I know what the overlapping controls are. And there are 34 overlapping controls, where I've got something in SOX and something in PCI, right? And I can look over here and say, establish or assign a probability of occurrence to natural threats, etc. And so this control ID 01173 Well, what if I want to look into that further and say, well, are they treating these differently? Is the payment card industry treating it different than SOX is requiring? Well, I can take a look at that by clicking on this link right here. And that'll take me to my website. And this link, this URL is fixed, except for this little number right here, okay? So 01173, you can see, is the control ID. And so there will always be these pages, even though they get updated every quarter, if you bookmark something, it'll always be there. And so that way you can share this information to our organization and say, hey, if you want to see why we need to do this control, you can do research with this ID. And all they need to have is a free login on our site. You don't have to have any paid login. You don't have to add them to your group or anything. They can have a free login and get to this. So once I'm here, I can do research on what does this control actually mean to me. Well, here are the mandates from the different areas. So SAS 109, and here's some banking and finance, and then here's the payment card one. And that's actually part of Visa e-commerce guide. Okay, so what we've really done here is, oops, that's not the one I wanted this one. So we were in a document with controls, and we picked one control, and we backed up and looked at all the mandates, all the citations that apply to that control. So in the Q3 release, we actually have 720 authority documents with 60,000 individual mandates. And those individual mandates are mapped to about 6,500 controls. So on average, every authority document has almost 100 mandates, and every control has almost 10 citations associated with it. And so one of the huge benefits of working with the UCF is that over time these things change. But because it looks like there's a 90% overlap on pretty much everything, every time we add something new, chances are you've got it 90% covered if you need to have those mandates. And then you only have to figure out what the differences are. So let's go back to our spreadsheet. And I've only put X's so far where the overlap is. So let's find the blanks again. And we're going to come over here. And so I've released this filter is what I've done, so that I've got all the internal guidance open for all the SOX mandates, and that's back to the 174 controls. And when I come over here, I'm going to put my X here again, and I'm going to copy that and paste that all the way down. And now if I release this filter, again, I've got some X's and some blanks. But if I come back over here and filter, now just show me the X's, these X's will now represent everything that I marked for payment card and everything that I marked for Sarbanes-Oxley. So it's the union of these two, and that's 567. So a lot of times people say, well, I'm going to have a specific framework that we're going to work in. And it could be an ISO framework and this framework. It doesn't really matter what the framework is. You can compare your framework to the mandates and see how things are. Now, one of the things I want to point out is there are several tabs along the bottom here. And these tabs separate these into different groups. And the reason we had to do this is because spreadsheets used to break, in fact, some of them still do, with more than 512 columns. And since we have 720 authority documents in the UCF, it's pretty obvious that we break spreadsheets. So in order to make it so that your spreadsheet doesn't fail on you, we've broken it out into separate tabs. Now, if you have, let's say, Excel, that's a more recent version, it does support more than 512 columns. So you can actually just treat this like a spreadsheet. You can come over here and say, well, I'm going to copy all these. Just literally Control-C, copy, and come over to the US tab. And actually, to do this, I'm going to release the filter. And I'm going to come over here and just paste it. I can enter, and it's pasting all the different columns that I had in the international tab over to the US tab. So I've got this combined tab thing going. So this means you can treat this just like a spreadsheet. Right? You can create your own spreadsheet, and you can say, well, I'm only going to copy in here the things that I want. So that's very easy to do. Okay. Notice how there are filters on the original columns that were in this tab, but these don't have filters. So that's pretty easy to fix. You just come over to the Data tab here and uncheck filters, and then check them again. Et voila, Everything now has the filters. So let's say I do want to check ISO 27001 versus the X's I've already made here. So I can open up this ISO guidance area, find ISO 27001, and come over here and select it. Everything but the blanks. And if I scroll back over to where I had my X's, you'll notice that there are X's in some places, but there are blanks in other. So there's a great deal of overlap. In fact, I can determine the overlap again by just looking for the X's and seeing there's 111, but I think we had something like 560 or 600 in the union of SOX and PCI. So interestingly, there's 111 overlap with that. So if you just relied on a single framework, chances are you're not going to meet your actual legal requirements. And on the flip side, if I select just the blanks, now I can see where there are ISO 27001 controls where there aren't any specific controls. There may be some in the hierarchy, but aren't any specific controls in PCI and SOX, and there's 76 of them. So you've got almost as much overlap as you have unique in ISO 27001. So if we want to actually map that gap overlap, it's pretty easy to do. So I already have X's in here. So let's go over here and let's actually just select the X's. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how do you determine gap overlap between two different areas. All right, so the documentation says just put X's next to where you want to have a control for your attention so you can determine whether you're going to apply it or not internally. And now what I'm showing you is, okay, assuming I have my set of X's, what if I need to add something else? What if we're expanding into Europe? What if there's a new law that comes out? What if PCI 3.0 comes out and I want to see how that compares to what we're doing? What if? So this is kind of a what if I want to apply ISO 27001 or 2, whatever I selected, to my internal stuff that I'm going to do. Show me where the gaps and the overlaps are between it, and I want to see it visually like an event diagram. So because I have a filter here on the X's, and these X's currently represent SOX and the union of SOX and PCI, okay? So what I can do is I can mark X's with an I also because I have this filter here for ISO 27001. So let's go back over and I'm going to put XI. And paste that down. So all 111 overlapping controls now have XI. And now if I want to find just the ISO controls, I can come back in here and select just the blanks. And again, no markings for PCI, no markings for SOX, but you'll see that ISO 27001 has controls. Come on, baby. Here we go. There we go. So you can see there's text in this column for ISO 27001. So let's go back over here, and now I'm going to put just an I here for ISO. And when I release all my filters, remember to release your filters because it gets kind of complicated if you don't. So I'll select all here, and I'll come back over and select all here. And now you'll see instances where there's XI and I's and blanks. And there's also going to be X's. Right? So all my possibilities are now here in my filter. So if I want to just see the union of ISO with SOX plus PCI, I can uncheck blanks, and there we go. And it's kind of like I've created my own Venn diagram. Here's the overlap. And again, what does this mean? I can click on this link. It'll take me to what we call the citations page or the commentary page. And it'll show you here's the control. Here's where the control sits in the hierarchy. So this is a parent to this control. Here are the child controls. Child controls are useful. Remember, this is a legal hierarchy. So when you're thinking, how do I do this? Well, here's legal precedents for how you accomplish it. Right? So these are actual, because it's a legal hierarchy, this shows you what the legal precedence is for establishing what you're trying to accomplish. So here's SOX, and here's ISO, and there's going to be PCI down here somewhere. Okay. Now I'm going to unmute everybody and see if anybody has any questions to this point. Okay, you're all unmuted.
Hi, Craig. It's Rudy.
Hi, Rudy.
Great. I think that's great, showing us how we can map the different requirements together. Do you have? Can you show us how you? So you're looking for a specific concept, and showing us how you map that, trying to find what regulations or standards that applies to. So, say if you're looking for data breach and seeing what different laws or standards apply to data breaches. Can you show us how to walk through that?
Actually, I can.
Great.
Let me just pause for wait 1 second here for a second and make sure I'm actually set up. Okay, here we go. Okay, so one of the things you can do, and actually this may be the easiest way, is to not use the spreadsheet, because we actually have quite a bit of research tools on our website. So let me just do a quick demonstration. Actually, let's go over here. And in fact, there's a site called Compliance Dictionary, compliancedictionary.com. And if I go back over here to this folder, where we have the language of compliance, in here is a link to the online compliance dictionary. So I can come in here and I can just type in data breach. Okay? And then here's the UCF ID, and then you can just see there's broader terms, see also's, narrower terms, and then here are related controls for this. So this is one extremely easy way to determine basically an item from the glossary and where it's connected to the control set. So that's one thing I want to demonstrate. Another thing is, if we go back to our spreadsheet, we can actually.
Hi, Craig. Is that just US, or is that international? Is that everything you have?
It's everything we have. It's everything. And we currently have in our glossary. So the glossary has over 25,000 entries that are all connected through. So it's quite an impressive corpus. Okay, so back in here, another way though to do it is, let me release the filters. And I could just say do a find, and under options, oh, actually I don't need to do under options, I can just do find all, data, or actually just do breach, find all. And Excel's not awesome, but you can see, you know, Arizona breach of a security system, California. So this is looking, you know, through the different, you can see it's row 2, right? So these are the actual laws themselves. And then now we get down to here, include compliance with organization's breach notification policy, breach, etc. So just know that row 2, right, this row here is the row for the actual laws themselves, the authority documents themselves. But there are quite a few in here, 97 cells. Does that help? 2 different ways to do it.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Craig.
No problem.
Hi, Craig. This is Andrew. I have another question to follow up with. May I ask a question?
Of course.
Okay, so my question is around how you guys create and come up with your UCF control language. Can you walk us through the thought process you have in consolidating related yet different languages from different authority sources? And I'm particularly interested in how you reconcile the difference of a specific criteria, because some control frameworks would say it's internal to determine your limit, you know, how frequent, how many times, and that sort of thing. But some requirements, authority source would dictate exactly how often you do so. So how do you handle that sort of difference when you come across those?
That's a great question. And you know, I should probably explain just kind of up front. When we get an authority document to map, and it could come from a number of places. It comes from our lawyers, our legal team, the people that we have working with us. It comes from our software developer partners. It comes from our customers. And in fact, this is just kind of a side note. If you are a licensee of the UCF, you actually have access to influence what we map. And I did want to show that. So under free materials, there's the UCF search tool. And if you click on the UCF search tool, one of the things you'll see is this whole area for authority documents, where you can request ADs and you can actually vote ADs up. So my votes and vote. So this one has been voted by somebody who has a license to the UCF. So once you have a license to the UCF, make sure that the documents that you want to have mapped are in our database by requesting an AD right over here. And then once you fill out the information and we check it and so on, then we can go ahead and put it up for voting and you can vote it up, and that's how we prioritize. Okay, so and part of that requesting process is you have to tell us where to find it. And we've had cases where someone said, hey, here's the documents, and they send it to us in email, and we say, no, we can't accept it that way. We have to have a chain of custody, and that's mandated by the lawyers. And I was actually recently reading an article where an online Supreme Court briefings, they had references to things where 50% of the links were broken. But they're not going to go update the links because at the time, that's where the link was, and they can't go back and change it because they have this record, this, it's legal precedence of where it was. So just because somebody moved it doesn't mean you moved the link. You have to keep the original link because that's what it was when it was there. Anyway, so we've got this, the research site where it came from. We get the information on the authority document, and there we go. And so once we start the mapping process, we have a mapper read the authority document through the lenses of the glossary and acronyms. We pull out every mandate in that document. So some documents only have a couple of mandates, literally a couple, and some have thousands. And so each mandate gets pulled out into a separate citation table. Okay, now here's where the magic begins. And as you said, some mandates are very prescriptive, and some are not prescriptive at all. Okay, and so the idea is if something's extremely prescriptive, chances are it's a lower, it's a level deeper in a hierarchy than something that's not very prescriptive. So maintaining a software inventory is one thing, but then if we go back to the spreadsheet here, maintain the software, but then review the inventory to ensure it is current. That may be obvious, but it's a more detailed requirement than maintaining a software inventory. Just like having log servers is one thing, but then synchronizing the clocks on the log server is actually a different thing, and yet you can't really have log servers without synchronizing the clocks. So what we do is we always try to point the mandate at the lowest level that it is, because that's going to be the most specific, and then we have it be a child of something that is more general. And laws typically tend to be more general, and then the stuff from industry groups and vendors and so on tend to be more specific. So we just place them appropriately in the hierarchy, but that does give those lower level controls, the more specific ones, a bit of legal standing, because once they're placed in the legal hierarchy, then you can see how they fit, and therefore there's precedence for how you actually accomplish something.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Hi, Craig. It's Rudy again. So
Hi.
You showed those control spreadsheets. You showed us the one on the bottom, the UCF controls. How does that spreadsheet relate to all the other 15 spreadsheets? Are they, is the final one we're looking at now, is that a composite of all the others together?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't say that well enough. Yeah, these all are just subsets of this one overall spreadsheet. So these are the top levels, and so if I go look at the UCF control spreadsheet, if I filters on, okay, no, it's okay. So right here, leadership and high-level objectives, that's one of the spreadsheets, and you can see it's the highest level. It's all the way to the left. And we're maintaining our hierarchy throughout, right? You can see it gets spaces indenting in there. And so somewhere down here, there's going to not be leadership anymore, and it's going to be the next impact zone, audits and risk management. So this is the chunk for the next spreadsheet. We just had people literally copying and pasting or deleting out rows and then passing them around to the different groups they wanted them to be in. And they just said, it's easy for you. You could just do it. So we did.
Great. And then a question that came up to me yesterday was, do you ever have a control or a standard where the concept differs between two controls or two bodies?
Actually, we do. We do. And interestingly, a couple of times we've gone back and challenged the legislature that said, well, you're one example is privacy in staying in hotels, right? So you're only allowed to keep the records for, I think, I don't know the specifics, okay, I just know the general, but I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks, right, just for the bookkeeping, or maybe it was 3 months or something like that. Well, there was one state that was having problems with hourly rental of hotel rooms, if you get my drift. And so they were mandating that hotels keep that data for a year. But that was contrary to a federal law, the federal law, on keeping that information. And so when we pointed that out to the legislature, they were forced to drop that requirement. More often, though, and that's really rare, because these guys that write these laws, they know their stuff. And it's rare that we see things in conflict. Generally, it's just one-upping. You know, oh, you're saying do it every 20 days. Well, we're going to say do it every 5 days. That kind of thing. But what we usually see is industry groups that recommend things that are against the law somewhere. And when we go to map those, we go back to them and say, we cannot map this control. So this control can't exist in our framework because it's contrary to law. And generally, those folks respond by modifying the recommended control. I mean, they have to, because they can't recommend stuff against the law. That'd be stupid. So yeah, we deal with that usually in an appropriate way. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people do not see that we deal with. I mean, we work with people before they publish things. We help them understand what they did before versus what they're doing now. We help them understand how it fits within different laws. We help them, I mean, there are groups that come to us and we map their stuff, and then the next time they add more controls because they're like, okay, well, we totally forgot about this whole area, and they only realized that because they looked at it against the whole UCF. We actually don't think that's like the best idea, because there's 6,500 controls in the UCF, and how can anybody focus on all 6,500 controls? It doesn't make sense.
Great. Could you explain a little bit the difference between the corporate zip download and the basic zip download, and which should people be utilizing, or is it?
Yeah.
Is there
well, I've just.
Purpose for that?
Yeah, actually, let me go to there's something on our website that actually shows it as well. Under About the UCF, which package is right for you, you can see basically there's a bunch of stuff you can get for free. And the basic package is, notice how it's really the control spreadsheet, research sites list, authority documents list, and language of compliance. It's really stuff I've just shown you. So I've demonstrated the basic package for you. So all this other stuff in the corporate package is literally everything else in this folder. All these things down here. XML data is obviously the database itself, so that would be for the database release. But all the contents in these folders, and in the basic package, you get samples of all these. And part of the samples, there's always a index. So you can check the index to see all the pieces in there, so you know what would be missing. But there's like 1 or 2 samples in every folder. The only thing that you don't get that's an above folder is in the authority documents folder in AD in depth. And I actually think this is one of the coolest things here. Let's open up the index. So for every authority document where appropriate, we're creating a report. And this report combines these 4 tables. So it's the authority document, the information about the authority document, so it's all from one AD perspective. Where did it come from? What are the individual mandates in it? And how are they mapped to the controls? And so this is the chain of evidence that you provide to the legal counsel to say, here's how we are dealing with this authority document. Here are the mandates that were discovered by the UCF team, and here are the general controls that they're mapped to, and you can take it a step further and say, here are our internal controls our language that we're using instead of the UCF language. So you can see what we're doing to meet these requirements. And so let's just go take a quick look at this. It doesn't really matter, so I'm just going to open the first one. So here's 10 CFR Part 73.54, and okay, this is NERC, and you can see here's where it came from, and here are the different types of controls. So literally, this is just output from our database, and we do this for every authority document where it's appropriate. We do it every quarter. And then impact zones, remember those are the top levels of the hierarchy, and so this cuts across 6 of them. And a lot of it's operational management. You can see that from the pie chart. And then here are the mandates. So these 2 columns, the citation and citation guide, these are the actual mandates themselves, right? The link to where did this come from, and here's a summary of that text. It's like Cliff Notes. So here are the Cliff Notes for this section, and here's what we said that means. Okay, and now we're not using the exact same words, obviously. So, but this is a harmonized control title, and if, again, we click on here, we can look back from this control, and we can see, okay, so here are the child controls, so in the legal hierarchy, and then what does it mean for banking and finance? What does it mean for healthcare? What does it mean for energy? And that's where we came from, payment card, etc. So this is an extremely useful report because this is like buying Cliff Notes for every mandate that you can then share with everybody on the team and the lawyers and whatever, whoever needs it. So that's why we do that. But it's interesting. Everything we've done in all these folders, all these reports, all these tables in the association, it's been customer driven. We have a customer, Honeywell. They said, we want to check the authority documents we care about. Check, 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 and push a button and have all this stuff just flow out. And the only way to accomplish that was to figure out how this stuff actually connected. And so that's why we came up with a data schema that matched with what they need, right? So this is the pretty version of this. But this schema is actually pretty accurately reflected here. So that's all these things are just responses from customers. Role incorporation, Microsoft. That was a response from them. That's what they really want. Events, we have SIM vendors that plug in here. And that's the other thing is we have a bunch of vendors, and I can go to the slide, a bunch of vendors who take the UCF and put it in their products in different ways. And so once you understand the UCF and what areas you want to leverage, then you can select a vendor probably more readily. You can see what is it that we care about most from a UCF perspective and see if anybody does those things for you. And one I just want to kind of call out, since we're talking specifically about spreadsheets here, is this one, Aruvio. They actually have a tool which lets you basically merge spreadsheets from quarter to quarter and understand differences. And so there isn't really a good spreadsheet delta tool just in the general market to understand the diffs between like our quarterly releases. But Aruvio has something in place where they actually understand the UCF structures and everything and can help show you the differences. So that might be worth looking at as well. And let's go back to elements. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
So do you have any way that you can tell, aside from the comparison that you just said this vendor does, what has been added in a quarter, or is that just something that you can't pull out?
No, it's a great question, and I should have mentioned it. In the zip file, along with these folders, there are these 2 documents. README First, and README First is actually useful. If people actually read it, then, which we know they don't, but I would never have to do a demo again, because this actually tells you literally everything I usually say in demonstration. So if you have questions, if you look at the README First, it actually tells you what's in each folder and how to get there and so on. And then in the release notes, every quarter we publish release notes. And in the release notes, you can see there's highlights, authority document activity, document change, new records, edited, deprecated, etc. And so if I look down here, you can see Here are the release highlights. So remapped 3, 20 new, deprecated 12. Controls. Remapped 308, new 156, deprecated 2. And so then you can see cumulative totals of records, any schema changes, and then here are the groups of authority documents, and so you can go in here and say, do I care about any of these? So yes, we do that. Yes. Thanks for asking that. You guys are great because you're asking all the things that I should have mentioned just along the way, but there's so much here.
This is Lisa at Fannie Mae. We're a customer of your tool through BWise, third party. I was wondering if we have licensing in a different product for this functionality, do we have access to all of the tools you're showing us on the website?
Actually, no. BWise only has the license to distribute it through their product, so that's not in Excel or whatever. But I mean, you can get this also. It's not that expensive. I mean, we showed it here. It's like $1,000 if you just want like the spreadsheets. So the basic package, what I've been demonstrating, is $1,000 per person. So if you wanted to do it, hey, this is research, and it's a really fast, easy research tool, then it's probably worth it because you're spending way more than that running around.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, the other thing is, if there's something specific you're looking for, it might be worth, I mean, let's take it, you can take it offline, but asking them and connecting me with them in a way so that we can help them accomplish what you want. Because really, we want, under here's our partners, right? So we want all these people to do exactly what you want them to do with our content. We're not trying to get you to buy from us and buy from them. That's not our purpose.
Okay.
And we fully understand that people license from us directly and then go find one of these guys to deploy. That's totally fine. We get that. We encourage that.
Okay, thank you.
This was great. I really appreciate your participation, and I appreciate your letting me just kind of blast through a bunch up at first. But hopefully you've got a better idea of what at least is in these first 4 folders, and leveraging these 4 tables in the UCF as well as the glossary and acronyms. Thanks again for your time.